Rejected Omega took in 3 homeless pups. 25 years later, They saved her from death row. The forest had always whispered to her. Its voice was soft yet insistent, weaving through the towering pines and the fallen leaves in the early morning mist. For most, it was just a dark and lonely place, a space to avoid. But to Leora, the one the villagers cruelly called the rejected Omega, it was home. She had no family, no throne, no wealth. The kingdom's roads and villages were a tapestry of cruelty, gossip, and suspicion, and she had never felt she belonged. But the forest accepted her. Its streams mirrored her eyes, its winds carried her sighs, and its shadows kept her secrets. On that particular dawn, Leora walked along a narrow path, her bare feet silent against the soft earth. Her cloak, patched and faded, wrapped her like a second skin. She had come here for water and berries, a modest breakfast, but the forest had something else waiting for her, something small, fragile, and trembling. 3 pups huddled together beneath a bramble bush, their fur matted with dirt, their ribs visible under thin, hungry skin. Leora's heart clenched. She knelt slowly, careful not to frighten them. "Shh, I won't hurt you," she whispered, her voice barely louder than the rustle of leaves. The pup's tiny eyes, wide with fear, flicked toward her, assessing, hesitating. One let out a faint whimper, and the sound broke something inside her. She reached into her cloak and pulled out a piece of stale bread, offering it gently. The smallest pup, a silver-furred creature with eyes like molten gold, crept forward first, sniffing the bread, then nibbling cautiously. Leora smiled softly. "There, safe, you're safe now." The forest seemed to sigh with her, as if approving this act of kindness. She could feel it, the weight of every harsh word, every sharp glance from villagers, and every rejection she had endured pressing down, only to be lifted slightly by the warmth she felt toward these tiny lives. From that day forward, the pups followed her everywhere. Their loyalty was immediate and pure. She named them Kale, Riven, and Thaler, though she often murmured their names in the quiet of the forest like a prayer. Kale, the silver one, was brave and clever. Riven, a dark brown with a white streak along his chest, was wary but clever, and Thaler, the smallest and weakest, was fierce in spirit. Together they formed a bond that neither time nor danger could break. Yet the villagers' whispers never ceased. "She's soft," they said. "No Omega can survive on kindness alone. She'll be eaten alive one day." Leora ignored them, yet each word stung. She knew the world outside her forest was harsh, but she had the pups, and for now that was enough. As the seasons passed, the pups grew. Their small frames turned strong, their eyes sharp and alert. The forest seemed to recognize their growth, its shadows deeper, its winds wilder, as if acknowledging the presence of something extraordinary. Leora noticed subtle changes too. The pups were faster, smarter, almost unnaturally perceptive. They would appear at the right moment, bark a warning, or guide her away from danger. Sometimes she caught a glimmer of golden light in their eyes during moonlit nights, and she shivered, not from fear but from awe. One night under a sky thick with stars, Leora sat by a crackling fire with the pups curled around her. The silver moon cast soft light on her face, highlighting the lines of worry she had tried to hide from herself. "I will protect you," she whispered. "Always. No one will take you from me." Kale nuzzled her hand, his warm weight comforting her like a heartbeat. But the world beyond the forest was changing. Rumors of unrest in the kingdom reached even these remote woods. The queen, a ruler both feared and revered, had grown restless. Strange occurrences whispered through the palace halls, curses, unnatural illnesses, missing animals, and omens no one could explain. Some said it was a sign of coming chaos. Others whispered that someone kind-hearted but powerful was destined to rise, challenging the rules of blood and crown. Leora did not think of kingdoms or crowns. She thought only of the safety of her little family. Yet sometimes, when she watched the pups sleeping peacefully, she wondered if their bond was part of something larger, something she could not yet understand. Winter arrived with biting cold winds that turned streams into thin sheets of ice. The forest became treacherous, and hunting for food was no longer easy. Leora, determined and fearless, ventured further than ever before. She found herself near the edge of the forest where the land opened into the kingdom's outskirts. The smell of smoke and stone of people in power was foreign and frightening. It was here, among the last trees before the open land, that she first saw them, the royal hunters. They rode black horses, their armor glinting under the pale sun. Their eyes, sharp and unkind, scanned the forest. Leora froze, her heart hammering. She had avoided the villagers' scorn for years, but the hunters were different. They were the law, the queen's shadow, and to them, an omega like her was nothing but prey. The pups growled low in their throats, their stance protective, ready to leap at any moment. Leora held them back, her hand on Kale's fur, whispering, "Stay, don't move." The hunter's leader dismounted, his cloak trailing behind him. "Who's here?" he called, his voice echoing through the trees. Leora did not respond. She could see the fear in the pups, the tension that made the air vibrate with unease. Then, without warning, one of the hunters raised a hand, pointing directly at them. Leora felt the forest's breath tighten, as if warning her of what was coming. But she could not run. She could not abandon her family. And then the smallest pup, Thaler, stepped forward. He was barely half the size of the hunter's horse, but something in his eyes glowed with an unnatural light. Kale and Riven followed, forming a circle around Leora. The hunters faltered, sensing something they could not name. A sudden, unearthly howl split the air. It was not just a sound, it was a warning, a declaration. The wind swirled violently, branches bending as if alive. The hunters' horses whinnied in fear, and the riders pulled back, eyes wide. Leora's heart leapt, not in fear but in awe. The pups' power, dormant for so long, had awakened at the precise moment they were needed. You cannot touch her," the leader stammered, though no one had spoken this aloud. And then, as quickly as it began, the moment passed. The hunters retreated, the forest returning to its quiet whispers. Leora sank to the ground, her body trembling. She looked at the pups, eyes shining in the moonlight. You saved me," she breathed, her voice choked with disbelief and gratitude. Kale pressed his head against her shoulder, Riven circled protectively, and Thaler's golden eyes glowed faintly, as if acknowledging their destiny. From that night on, Leora knew something had changed. The forest had always been her refuge, but now it was a sanctuary filled with secrets and power she could not yet comprehend. The pups were not just her companions, they were guardians, part of something greater than her imagination. Yet beyond the forest, shadows stirred. The queen's gaze, sharp and unrelenting, had fallen upon her during a passing hunt. Something in Leora's actions, the mercy, the bravery, the bond with creatures no one else understood, had sparked recognition. The queen, with all her power and hidden sorrows, had felt it like a ripple in a still pond. Leora had no knowledge of this, but she could sense change in the air. The wind carried strange whispers, and sometimes she caught a glimpse of figures at the forest's edge, watching, waiting, assessing. She shivered, though it was not the cold that caused it. She hugged the pups close, her fingers tangling in their fur. "Whatever comes," she murmured, "we face it together, always." The forest seemed to murmur back, a low, protective hum. And somewhere in the distance, a faint shadow flickered, a reminder that the world beyond her sanctuary had begun to notice the Omega who had taken in 3 abandoned pups, unaware that this act of mercy would bind fate, power, and destiny together in ways she could never imagine. And as the first stars appeared in the night sky, Leora and her 3 companions curled together under the ancient trees, the forest holding its breath. Something was coming, something that would change their lives forever. The forest had always been Leora's sanctuary, a world of soft shadows and whispering winds. But that peace was fragile, and the outside world was closing in. Weeks after the royal hunters had retreated in fear, strange signs began to appear. The air near the forest's edge shimmered faintly, as though charged with an unseen energy. Birds fled in sudden flocks, and even the pup's instincts told them the quiet of the trees was no longer enough. One morning, as the silver mist hovered over the forest floor, a messenger arrived. He was a man in fine clothes, though his eyes betrayed urgency and fear. He bowed stiffly before Leora, his voice trembling. "Lady, the queen requests your presence. You are summoned to the palace." Leora's hand froze on Kale's fur. The palace. She had never stepped foot beyond the forest. Its stories were filled with grandeur, power, and cruelty. Nobles with sharp tongues, soldiers with sharper blades, and the queen a figure spoken of in fear and awe. "Why would the queen want me?" she whispered, mostly to herself. The messenger looked uneasy. "It is difficult to explain. She has noticed your actions in the forest. She believes your bond with the creatures," he glanced nervously at the pups, "may hold importance for the kingdom." Importance. The word sounded strange on her lips. To Leora, her forest, her life with Kale, Riven, and Thaler had been about survival, about love and protection. Not kingdoms or crowns, but the pups seemed to understand. They padded closer to her, their eyes golden and alert. Kale nuzzled her hand, Riven circled protectively, and Thaler pressed against her side. Leora drew a deep breath and nodded. "Then we go," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. The journey to the palace was like stepping into another world. The trees gave way to cobblestone roads, the smells of smoke and stone, of horses and people, filling her senses. The closer they came, the more the pups stiffened, alert to danger. Leora noticed whispers in the wind, shadows that seemed to follow them. When they finally arrived, the palace loomed above them, massive and unyielding. Its walls were white stone, streaked with age, and banners of the royal crest fluttered in the cold wind. Guards lined the entrance, their spears glinting in the morning sun. The messenger stepped aside. "This way, lady." Leora's heart pounded as they entered. The hall was vast, filled with the echo of footsteps on polished marble. Tapestries hung from the walls, depicting kings and queens from centuries past. She felt small, an intruder in a world that had never welcomed her kind. A hush fell as they approached the throne. There, seated like a goddess among mortals, was the queen. Her hair was dark as midnight, her eyes sharp and piercing. Even from a distance, Leora could sense the weight of power she carried. Yet beneath it there was something else, a loneliness, a longing that made Leora's chest tighten. "You are Leora," the queen said, her voice both commanding and soft. "The one they call the rejected Omega." Leora bowed, unsure how to respond. "I am she, your majesty." The queen studied her, her gaze flicking to the three pups who had followed without hesitation. "You care for them," she said simply. "Not out of duty, not for gain, but for love. That is rare." Leora's heart fluttered. The queen's words were not judgmental. They were curious. Tentative even, she nodded. I cannot abandon them." The queen leaned forward slightly. "And yet the world will not allow such kindness without consequence. You have power, though you may not know it. The bond you share with these creatures, it is ancient. It is dangerous, it is needed." Leora did not understand, and she said so. "Needed? For what?" The queen's eyes softened, but only for a moment. "The kingdom is cursed. Shadows linger where they should not. Famine, illness, and death move where they ought not. And there are forces rising, forces that recognize what you have." The pups growled low, their fur bristling. Leora put a hand on Kale's head. "I will not let anyone harm them," she said firmly. The queen's gaze lingered on her, intense and unreadable. "Then perhaps you will join me, not as a subject, not as a servant, but as someone who can change fate itself." Leora's mind spun. Join the queen, stay in the palace. Could she leave the forest, leave the life she had built with her companions? And yet, there was a pull she could not deny. Something in the queen's presence, the way her power seemed both commanding and lonely, stirred a strange longing deep within her. Days passed, and Leora began to learn the ways of the palace. The court was a place of whispers and unspoken threats. Nobles studied her with suspicion, their eyes sharp, their smiles false. Yet the queen remained, watching her with a mixture of calculation and curiosity. In the quiet moments, the queen would approach her and they would speak, not of politics, not of crowns, but of small things. The scent of the forest, the loyalty of creatures, the pain of being alone. Leora found herself drawn to her, even as fear and caution warred within her heart. One evening, in a secluded garden where the stone paths were lit by lanterns, the queen approached. "Why do you care for creatures others would abandon?" she asked. Leora's fingers brushed against a petal. "Because no one else would, because they are weak and I cannot leave the weak to suffer. I do not understand why, but it feels right." The queen's eyes softened. "You have courage, strength, and yet you are gentle. That is why the bond exists. That is why the kingdom's fate may rest with you." Leora's chest tightened. She had always feared the world outside her forest. Now it seemed that world was drawing her in, testing her, and somewhere in the edges of her mind, awakening feelings she did not expect. The pups, ever vigilant, were her constant companions. They moved with her through the palace halls, their presence a silent warning to those who might seek to harm her. And in their loyalty, she found courage she had never known she possessed. But danger was never far. One night while walking through a dim corridor, Leora overheard a hushed conversation between the queen and a nobleman. "They are dangerous," the noble whispered. "The Omega, with those creatures, she could overthrow us." The queen's voice was quiet but firm. "Or she could save us, but if she is treated as a threat, we are doomed." Leora's heart pounded. The words confirmed her fears. The court was a place of power, and she was caught between mercy and danger, love and suspicion. The next morning the queen summoned her. "You must understand," she said, her voice steady, "that being here is not safe. The bond you share is seen as a threat, but it is also a weapon and a gift. You have a choice: leave or embrace what destiny has placed before you." The pups nuzzled her as she knelt, their warmth a reminder that she was never truly alone. Kale's eyes glimmered with understanding, Riven circled protectively, and Thaler pressed close, his tiny frame fierce and loyal. Leora met the queen's gaze. The air between them was electric, charged with tension and unspoken emotion. Fear, curiosity, longing, and admiration, each mingled in a way that left Leora's heart racing. "I will stay," she said finally. "I will not abandon them, and I will not abandon what this could be." The queen's lips curved into a faint, almost imperceptible smile. "Very well," she said. "Then we are bound, and bound is not easily broken." The days that followed were filled with training, observation, and quiet moments of shared understanding. The queen showed Leora the ways of the kingdom, its politics, its secrets, its hidden magic. Leora, in turn, showed the queen the value of loyalty, mercy, and intuition. And always the pups were near, their presence a bridge between the wild and the court, between fear and trust, between what was and what could be. Yet tension simmered beneath the surface. Nobles whispered in corners, soldiers watched with suspicion, and even the queen's closest advisors began to question the wisdom of allowing an outcast with magical companions into the heart of power. One night, as the moon rose full and silver over the palace, Leora walked the quiet corridors with the pups at her heels. She paused at the edge of the throne room, gazing at the shadows that seemed to shift unnaturally, alive with anticipation. Something was coming. A test. A threat. She could feel it in the air, in the way the light flickered, in the way the pup's fur bristled. Kale growled softly, and Thaler's eyes glowed faintly. Leora tightened her grip on them. "Whatever it is," she whispered, "we face it together, always." And from the shadows a figure watched, hooded, silent, and calculating. The queen had not lied, forces beyond comprehension were stirring. And the bond between the rejected Omega and her three extraordinary companions would soon be tested in ways even Leora could not imagine. The palace that once seemed grand and welcoming had begun to feel like a cage. Leora walked through its marble halls, her steps echoing in the cold, silent corridors. Though she had chosen to stay, to face the unknown, every shadow now carried suspicion. The whispers of the nobles, which had been soft at first, were growing louder. Some called her the forest witch behind her back. Others questioned why the queen would place so much trust in an outsider. The pups, Kale, Riven, and Thaler, walked closely beside her, always alert, their eyes glowing faintly in the dim corridors. They were no ordinary wolves. Leora had begun to see glimpses of the magic they carried, the golden glimmer in their eyes when danger approached, the way they seemed to sense threats before anyone else did. She had saved them once. Now they were saving her again, in ways she did not yet fully understand. One evening, the queen summoned Leora to the private garden, a hidden sanctuary filled with fragrant flowers and winding paths. The moon cast a soft silver glow, and the air was thick with anticipation. "You are troubled," the queen said, her voice low and measured, yet carrying a hint of warmth. Leora nodded, gripping Kale's fur lightly. "The nobles, they are plotting. They see me as a threat, and the more they whisper, the more I feel unsafe." The queen approached, her steps silent, deliberate. "The palace has always been a place of power and fear. It is not meant to be kind, but kindness and loyalty are stronger than cruelty if you wield them wisely." Leora looked at her, eyes wide. "I don't know if I am strong enough." The queen crouched slightly, bringing her closer. "Strength is not only in sword or crown, it is in heart, in choices, in the courage to protect what is dear even when the world wants you to fail." The words touched Leora deeply. She had never imagined someone of the queen's power would see her, not just her usefulness but her heart. And yet, even as admiration and longing stirred within her, fear lingered. The court was a storm she could not fully understand, and her bond with the pups made her an easy target for those who coveted power. That night, the palace seemed unusually quiet. Leora lay awake in her chamber, listening to the soft breathing of the pups curled at her feet. Shadows moved along the walls, long and thin, as if the night itself was alive. She reached out and stroked Thaler's head. "We are not alone," she whispered, "but together we are strong." Before sleep could claim her, a loud, sharp sound echoed through the hall, a single warning bell. The pups sprang up instantly, their eyes glowing brighter than ever. Leora rose, heart pounding. "Something's wrong," she said, her voice steady despite the fear twisting in her stomach. The queen appeared at the doorway, her expression grave. "The nobles have acted. They claim you are a danger to the crown. They demand your removal, death if you resist." Leora's breath caught. The words were like ice in her veins. They cannot." "They can," the queen said softly, but her eyes betrayed a storm of emotion. "Unless we act, you will be taken tonight." The three pups growled, their fur bristling like living fire. Kale stepped forward, his golden eyes meeting hers. "We will not let them harm you," she whispered, more to herself than to them. The pups responded with a series of low, resonant howls that seemed to echo through the palace walls, a sound both haunting and powerful. The queen moved quickly, her cloak flowing like water around her. "Follow me," she said. "We will use the shadows. They will not find us if we move with the night." Together, they slipped through hidden corridors and forgotten passageways. The pups guided them with uncanny precision, sensing every trap, every guard, every whisper of danger. Leora's heart raced, not just from fear, but from a strange exhilaration. She had never felt so alive, so connected to creatures she loved, to a woman she admired, and to a destiny she did not yet understand. Hours later, they emerged in a secluded courtyard, a place where moonlight kissed the marble floors and the wind carried the scent of wildflowers. The queen turned to her, eyes intense. "Tonight, you are not merely an outsider. You are a guardian and the choice is yours. Will you embrace your strength even if it terrifies you? Leora swallowed, feeling the weight of her decisions. She thought of the pups, of their fierce loyalty. She thought of the forest, of the life she had built on trust and love. And she thought of the queen, whose loneliness mirrored her own in ways she could not yet name. Yes, she said, voice steady and clear. I will not run. I will protect everything that matters. The queen's lips curved into a faint smile, almost imperceptible, but it lit the darkness between them. Then we begin, she whispered. The danger did not wait. Guards entered the courtyard from both sides, their faces stern, their weapons raised. But the pups were ready. With a coordinated growl, they moved as one, faster than any human could follow. Thaler leapt high, knocking spears aside. Riven darted between legs, unbalancing men in armor, while Kale used his size and strength to protect Leora. Leora felt a surge of courage she had never known. With the queen at her side, they moved together, hearts and minds aligned. She felt the bond with the pups deepen, almost as if it were a living force, invisible yet undeniable, surrounding them in a shield of loyalty and power. The confrontation was brief but fierce. The nobles and guards underestimated the Omega and her companions. By the time the fight ended, they were left panting, standing victorious but not unscathed. Leora looked at the queen, whose eyes held a mixture of relief and admiration. You are extraordinary, the queen said softly, her voice close enough that Leora could feel her warmth. And yet, there is more to come. The court will not forgive, and those who plot in shadows will not rest. Leora nodded, her fingers brushing Kale's fur. We face it together, she said, and the queen did not doubt her. Days passed, and the palace became a place of constant vigilance. Leora trained with the queen, learning the ways of strategy, diplomacy, and magic. The pups continued to grow, their senses sharp and minds keen. Slowly, Leora began to understand the true depth of their bond. They were not just companions. They were extensions of her heart, her courage, her very essence. Yet, even in this growing strength, a sense of foreboding lingered. Leora dreamed of shadowed corridors and whispers of betrayal. She saw visions of herself facing impossible choices, and of the queen standing beside her, torn between duty and desire. One night, as the wind howled outside the palace walls, Leora stood at the edge of the balcony, the pups at her feet. The city below was quiet, but the air was thick with tension. She felt the pull of destiny, the weight of responsibility, and the stirring of something deeper, an unspoken bond with the queen that neither dared to name. The queen approached silently, her hand brushing against Leora's. The contact was electric, sending a shiver down Leora's spine. You are not alone, the queen said softly. Whatever comes, we face it together. Leora looked up into her eyes, feeling a mixture of fear, longing, and trust. Together, she echoed. The night deepened and the shadows lengthened. The court whispered of rebellion, of danger, of curses that would not wait. But in the quiet of the palace, a bond had been forged, stronger than fear, stronger than doubt, stronger than the shadows themselves. And yet the danger was closer than they realized. Hidden in the halls, in the corners, eyes watched, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Leora, the queen, and the three extraordinary pups were bound together, but the world outside was unrelenting. The wind carried a faint, eerie howl, and the pups' ears twitched. Leora's heart raced. She knew, without knowing how, that the next trial would be the hardest yet, testing their courage, their loyalty, and the fragile trust that had formed between them. The palace had never felt more alive, or more dangerous. Shadows clung to the walls, whispering secrets that only the keenest ears could hear. Leora stood in the throne room, her three extraordinary pups at her side, every sense alert. Kale's silver fur gleamed faintly in the torchlight, Riven's dark coat seemed to melt into the shadows, and Thaler's golden eyes glowed softly, reflecting the flickering flames. The queen's voice broke the silence. Tonight it comes. The court's discontent, the hidden threats, the power that hungers for control, they will move. And you, Leora, are at the center. Leora swallowed hard. She had trained for this. She had prepared. But nothing could have fully readied her for the weight of destiny pressing down like the stone ceiling above them. The first sign came as a sudden tremor through the floor. Torches flickered, casting long, twisted shadows. Servants screamed from the corridors, running to hide. Leora's heart pounded, but she steadied herself. The pups moved instinctively, forming a protective circle around her. She felt their power, their loyalty, their fierce devotion. It bolstered her courage. "They are coming from the east wing," Kale growled softly, his golden eyes flashing. Riven's low bark confirmed it, and Thaler's glow intensified, a signal that the danger was closer than they imagined. The queen approached, her expression calm but intense. "We do not flee. We face them, together," Leora nodded. "Together." And then the first wave of invaders appeared, nobles who had conspired in secret, soldiers who had betrayed their oaths, all moving with precision and malice. But they had underestimated the power of loyalty, of love, of bonds stronger than fear. The pups leapt forward, faster than anyone could follow. Thaler darted between legs, tripping soldiers. Riven knocked spears aside with strength unexpected for his size. Kale's growl rose to a roar that seemed to shake the very walls, halting the advance of the intruders. Leora moved with them, her hand brushing the queen's briefly, their connection silent but electric. Magic, subtle but undeniable, pulsed through the palace. The pups' golden eyes cast light that pierced shadows. Walls trembled, doors swung open as if guided by an unseen hand, and the intruders faltered, their courage failing against the unity before them. Amid the chaos, Leora saw a figure at the edge of the hall, cloaked and silent. Her heart leapt. She recognized the stance, the aura. It was not one of the palace's traders. It was something older, darker, more dangerous. "You are brave," the queen whispered, her hand resting on Leora's arm. "But bravery alone will not be enough." Leora understood. She had the courage, she had the loyalty of the pups, but she needed more: wisdom, strategy, and the queen's guidance. Together they were formidable, but this force was beyond anything they had faced. The figure moved closer. As it stepped into the torchlight, Leora gasped. It was a shadowed being, tall and imposing, with eyes that seemed to pierce into her very soul. Its voice was low, almost a whisper, yet it carried across the hall. "You have grown strong, little Omega," it said. "But strength is not enough. Power without control is destruction." The queen stepped forward, her posture regal, unyielding. This is her strength. Her bond with her companions, her loyalty, her heart, are not weaknesses. They are her weapon. Leora felt the words like a shield. She had never known power like this, not from swords or spells, but from connection. The pups circled her, their bodies radiating warmth and light, their golden eyes fixed on the shadowed figure. Suddenly, the figure lunged, moving faster than human eyes could follow. Leora felt a chill run through her, a danger unlike any she had known. The queen moved beside her, sword raised, ready to defend. But it was the pups who intercepted first. Thaler leapt high, striking with precision. Riven and Kale moved as one, a blur of strength and instinct, their bond with Leora guiding their every movement. The shadowed figure staggered, then retreated slightly, as if surprised by the resistance. Leora felt a surge of confidence. She raised her hand, calling upon the trust, loyalty, and love that bound her to her companions. A warmth spread through her chest, radiating outward, touching the queen and the pups. The palace seemed to respond, walls trembling, light glimmering, shadows recoiling. The battle continued, fierce but measured. Every move Leora made was guided by instinct, by the bond with her pups, and by the silent strength of the queen beside her. She felt fear, yes, but also exhilaration. She realized that courage was not the absence of fear, but the choice to act despite it. At the height of the conflict, the shadowed figure paused, its eyes narrowing. "You are not ordinary," it whispered. "Your bond, it is ancient. It cannot be broken." Leora's heart raced. She understood then. The pups were not just companions. They were guardians, part of a legacy that had been hidden for centuries. Their loyalty, their power, their very existence was tied to the balance of the kingdom itself. With this realization, Leora moved with clarity and purpose. She stepped forward, placing a hand on Kale's head. "Now," she whispered. The pups responded instantly, their movements precise and coordinated, pushing the intruders back, guiding the queen safely through the hall. The shadowed figure let out a low hiss, retreating toward the distant corridor, but Leora did not falter. "We are together," she said aloud, her voice carrying through the hall, "and we are stronger than you." The figure vanished into darkness, leaving behind a silence that was almost deafening. Leora's chest heaved with exhaustion and relief. She looked at the queen, who met her gaze with pride and something deeper, something unspoken but felt. "You saved us," the queen said softly, her hand lingering near Leora's. "Not just the palace, but me. You have done what few could, faced fear and made it bow to loyalty and love." Leora knelt, exhausted but triumphant, and the pups circled her, their heads pressed against her hands and arms. Thaler's golden eyes glimmered. Kale's silver fur seemed to shimmer in the torchlight, and Riven's protective stance softened. She realized fully that the bond they shared had saved more than life. It had saved hope, courage, and the very heart of the kingdom. Days passed after the battle. The court, shaken and humbled, slowly came to respect the Omega and her companions. The queen, once lonely and cautious, found herself opening to trust, to companionship, and to something deeper with Leora. One evening, in the palace garden under the light of a full moon, the queen approached Leora. "You have changed the kingdom," she said, her voice soft but strong, "and you have changed me." Leora looked into her eyes, feeling a warmth she had never known. "We changed each other," she replied. The pups curled at their feet, loyal and watchful, but relaxed in the knowledge that the threat had passed for now. Kale nuzzled Leora's hand, Riven leaned against her leg, and Thaler pressed close to the queen, a bridge between them, a reminder of the bond that had triumphed over fear. For the first time in her life, Leora felt the weight of rejection lift. She had been an outcast, a rejected Omega, but she had become more than that. She was a guardian, a protector, and a heart that inspired loyalty and courage. Yet even in peace, she remained vigilant. Shadows might rise again, threats could return, but she had learned something invaluable. Power was not only in the crown or the sword, it was in connection, in love, in trust, and in courage. The queen took Leora's hand, her eyes reflecting the silver of the moon. "The kingdom may still face darkness," she said, "but as long as we stand together, we will face it with light." Leora nodded, looking at the three pups who had changed her life. "Together," she said, a promise that encompassed past, present, and future. And so, under the quiet glow of the moon, the Omega, the Queen, and three extraordinary companions stood united. They had faced fear, danger, and betrayal, and emerged stronger. The kingdom was safe for now, but more than that, hearts once isolated had found connection, love, and loyalty beyond measure. The forest and the palace, once distant worlds, had merged through courage, mercy, and destiny. And in that unity, a new legend was born, of an outcast who saved a kingdom, of creatures who were more than they seemed, and of hearts that dared to trust, even in the darkest night. The pups' golden eyes reflected the rising sun, and Leora felt for the first time that she was home, not just in the forest, not just in the palace, but in the bond they had all created together.